a rack that creaked instead of screamed, a pear that bloomed in iron, a droplet of water that broke the mind one tap at a time. How did silence become a weapon? Breathe slowly, and I'll tell you the stories gently. Keep listening to uncover the quietest corners of cruelty. Hey friends, get cozy, breathe deep, and picture this: a shining brass sculpture under the Sicilian sun. You're now walking through the court of Phalaris, the tyrant of Akragas, around 560 BCE. His artisans have brought forth something extraordinary: a hollow statue of a bull forged from polished bronze, large enough to hold a person within. To the casual eye, it's a work of art, an offering to the gods, perhaps. But its purpose, dear listener, was far more deliberate. Once someone was sealed inside, a fire was lit beneath the bull's belly. But here's the twist. The structure had an intricate pipe system built into its head. The screams inside? They were transformed, acoustically engineered, into the melodic bellowing of a bull, a cruel concert echoing across the marble courts. And the bull's inventor? According to legend, he was the first to test it. Justice, in Phalaris's eyes, had symmetry. Still, it's strange to imagine how such cold ingenuity could sound almost musical, a lullaby of metal and fire. Let that thought rest gently in your mind, like smoke curling into the sky. Would you have stopped to listen or walked away in silence? You're lying still now, aren't you? Eyes closed, safe and still. Let's visit 16th century Europe together. In a quiet chamber, tucked behind heavy wooden doors, rests a small, unassuming object. It looks like a flower bud made of iron, with delicate leaves that unfold from a central stem. This, calmly known as the Pear of Anguish, was not fruit, but function. It was used during inquisitions, in witch trials, in whispered interrogations. Once inserted into the mouth, or other orifices, the stem would turn and the petals would open, slowly, quietly, just like a bloom in spring. But instead of beauty, it brought silence. Its design was intentional. There were no blades, no blood, just pressure. It forced stillness until confession or collapse. No one's entirely sure who invented it. Some say it never existed beyond rumor, but still, replicas sit behind museum glass, each with a little plaque that calls it mythical. And yet, the metal is real, and so are the records. In a world where words were dangerous, silence often came in iron. Let your breath fall soft, like a closing petal. Isn't it curious how something shaped like a blossom could end in hush? Dear listener, imagine stretching. Not the kind you do before sleep, but the kind history remembers in whispers. The rack, used widely during the Middle Ages and beyond, was a simple wooden frame with rollers at each end. The accused would be gently tied, wrists to one side, ankles to the other. Then, crank by crank, the body would be extended. Ligaments whispered, joints sighed apart, all in silence, save for the creak of wood and rope. But what's odd is how methodical it all was. Torturers weren't brutes, always. They were craftsmen. They didn't rush. They timed every turn. It was about control, not chaos. The room would be dim, maybe lit by torchlight, maybe quiet but for murmured questions. A single candle might flicker near the crank, and still the wheel would turn. In some records, those broken by the rack later walked again, though differently, forever altered, like wood softened by steam and bent in new shapes. It's strange how stillness and pressure could replace fire and fury, how slow tension could unravel truth. Let that thought uncoil inside you like a winding rope. If the rack spoke, would it whisper or creak? Hey friends, dim the lights just a little more. Tonight, let's drift to ancient Persia. Scaphism, a method nearly forgotten, took place under open skies. It was quiet, natural, almost pastoral. A man would be gently placed inside two hollowed-out canoes, stacked like a human sandwich, head, arms, and legs exposed. Milk and honey were poured generously over the skin, a feast not for the body, but for insects. Each day the victim was fed again. More milk, more honey. The sweetness brought the bugs. The stillness brought the sun. And nature, calm, impartial, did the rest. What makes this haunting is how undisturbed it all was. There were no guards, no whips, just trees, reeds, riverbanks. Days passed, maybe weeks. The body rested, bloated with sustenance, and nature took her gentle course. The Persians believed this method wasn't punishment, but poetry. The body became an ecosystem. The soul drifted out as birds sang above. Let that stillness cradle your mind. When the forest is silent, do you think it remembers? You might be lying on your pillow now, wondering how people dreamed in the Middle Ages. Well, some dreamed with iron at their throat. The heretic's fork was small, just two short prongs pointing opposite directions, worn between the chin and the sternum, or sometimes between the chest and the neck. It didn't puncture deep, it didn't kill. It simply prevented sleep, nodding, prayer, any movement of the head, pain, any drop of the chin, pressure. All you had to do was stay still. This was often paired with a simple inscription, "I recant." That was the goal. Not death, not blood, just surrender. Sleep, for these souls, became dangerous. A drifting head could mean disaster. So they learned to sit upright, eyes wide. Some fell asleep standing. Others never did. What's fascinating is the elegance. A single strap, a bit of steel. But the effect? Total silence. Total compliance. A ritual of control performed by a whisper of iron. So breathe easy. You're free to shift your pillow. Have you ever felt how heavy a head becomes when you're told not to move? Hey friends, if you're enjoying these gentle descents into forgotten corners of time, consider subscribing. That way, you won't miss a single breath of history's quietest secrets. Tonight, picture a tall wooden pyramid, carved smooth as stone, standing in a silent Italian cellar. This was the Judas cradle, and despite its name, it didn't scream. It waited. The accused, naked, exhausted, would be seated gently atop the pointed tip. No blades, no fire, just gravity. Ropes held the limbs out wide, so all weight rested on a single point. And then, nothing. No turn of the wheel. No lash. The body sank slowly, inch by inch, under its own weight. A meditation in stillness, discomfort, and eventual surrender. It wasn't always fatal. Some survived. But they emerged altered. Hips out of place, minds elsewhere. Some said they heard music while atop the pyramid, a kind of internal choir that only suffering could unlock. Monks documented it not as punishment, but purification. cleansing the soul by stillness, breaking the ego with pressure. Let your breath rise and fall like a slow descent. How long could you balance on a single point of belief? You're in 18th century Bavaria now. The room is stone-walled with a faint smell of soot and sage. In the center stands a throne, not for a king, but for questions. The iron chair, a metal seat full of small spikes, not blades, just points, hundreds of them. The accused was placed upon it gently. No straps were needed if they moved carefully. But the moment they fidgeted, the metal whispered back. Heat was sometimes added, not to cook, just to discomfort. A brazier underneath, a warm nudge toward stillness. It said the fear of moving hurt more than the pain itself, and that's the curious part. It wasn't agony, it was anticipation, a moment suspended in perpetual caution. In a way, it taught meditation. The victim would learn to breathe deeply, remain absolutely still, and let time pass. A strange kind of peace wrapped in prickling iron. Let your body melt into softness now. Could you stay still, even if the chair beneath you whispered, "Don't"? Hey, friends, let's shift now to something small, almost harmless in appearance. The thumbscrew was a box of iron. Just 3 plates. A little screw on top. You'd place the finger or thumb between the lower 2 plates and twist, but slowly. Always slowly. That was the rule. A quarter turn at a time. Pressure building like a tide under moonlight. Sometimes it was used on toes, occasionally on knuckles. It wasn't about damage. It was about sensation. A creeping compression, like being hugged by a machine that never blinked. Torturers used it between questions, as punctuation. It wasn't the main act, just the prelude. But for the victim, it was enough. What makes it haunting is its portability. It could sit in a pocket, carried in a coat, a quiet threat that didn't need to shout. Imagine holding such a device in your hand, so small yet so deliberate. Would you squeeze or simply set it down? Let's go east now, to a humid jungle in Southeast Asia, where the air is heavy and the ground fertile. You're lying on your back above a patch of young bamboo. And here's the legend. Bamboo, when growing fast, can pierce the flesh like a blade. It doesn't hurry. It simply grows. 1 inch, 2 inches, up and up. Prisoners were tied above freshly cut shoots, given water, fed lightly, and left. Over days, the stalks would rise, slow and steady, pushing into whatever lay above. Skin, cloth, rope. Some say the pain was less than expected. The body adjusted. The process was like being gently lifted until it wasn't. Whether myth or fact, the story endured because it's unsettlingly peaceful. Nature wasn't angry. The bamboo didn't mean harm. It simply grew. And humans, we just happened to be in the way. Let your thoughts stretch like a green shoot through soft soil. What grows beneath you when you lie still? You've likely heard of this one, haven't you? The Iron Maiden. But let's clear something up. She may never have existed. Still, picture her. A tall iron sarcophagus shaped like a woman, lined with metal spikes, not sharp enough to kill instantly, but long enough to discourage movement. The accused would stand within. The doors would close. The spikes would press. Not impale, but press. Breath became shallow. Time lost its shape. Historians say it was a 19th century invention, created to dramatize medieval cruelty. But some records hint otherwise. A chamber in Nuremberg, a replica in London. And so, the myth remains. The Iron Maiden is less about blood, more about belief. We believe she existed because she feels like she should have, like a mother of silence, like a cold womb that never rocked. Let your breath deepen. If a myth can make you shiver, does that make it real? Hey friends, lie back and imagine a quiet hillside in 17th century Germany. The grass is tall, the sky wide, and at the center, a wooden cartwheel. Known as the breaking wheel, or simply the wheel, this tool was more than transportation. It became a ritual of spectacle. The condemned was laid across it, limbs aligned with the wooden spokes, and then, with a metal bar, the executioner would break each bone, one by one, pressing the limbs down into the frame like twigs bent beneath a boot. But here's the detail that lingers. The wheel was often raised afterward, propped up on a pole. There, the body would remain, twisted into the circle, facing the wind, the birds, the stars. It was less about pain, more about permanence. A human turned into a symbol, a spiral of punishment. Locals sometimes passed by in silence. Children looked up, holding their parents' hands. Life continued. The wheel remained. So now, as your own limbs rest gently, unbent and peaceful, have you ever noticed how a circle holds both beginning and end? You're now stepping quietly into a candlelit chamber in Renaissance Italy. The walls are stone, the floor swept, and on the table lies something odd, like tongs but heavier, ribbed, serrated, called the crocodile shears. This device wasn't used often, nor on many. It had a very specific purpose, symbolic and ceremonial. It was reserved for those who betrayed kings. The shears would be heated in a brazier until glowing red. Then, delicately, they were clamped onto a single finger, or sometimes more, a royal reminder. They didn't cut, they seared. They closed like jaws. Hence, the name. What makes this particularly haunting is its elegance. The device was shaped to echo the jaws of a beast. Nature mimicked in iron, a predator forged by men. And the message? Simple. You raised your hand against the crown. The crown removed it from history. It was rarely used, but its presence whispered louder than its bite. Now, feel your own fingers, whole, warm, free to move as they please. Would you raise a hand, knowing a crocodile watched in silence? Take a slow breath, friend. Let's step into 16th century Scotland, where something called the boot waited in stone dungeons. Imagine a thick wooden casing, shaped like a shin-high boot. Inside, your leg is nestled, snug but still. Then, wooden wedges are gently tapped into the space between your leg and the boot. Each wedge added with care. Each strike measured. Tap, tap, tap. Pressure mounts. Bone doesn't scream. It cracks. But not all at once. Slowly. Like thawing ice splitting underfoot. There were versions made of iron, too. Heated. Designed to wrap the limb in warmth that never comforted. The boot was used rarely. It wasn't for quick justice. It was for the moments where truth was stubborn, and bones persuasive. What's curious is how passive it seems. You sit, they strike, and the pain isn't for motion, but stillness, from fitting into a mold you were never made for. Let your legs stretch gently beneath your blanket. How much space do we need before we break? Let's travel now to France, where a tool once called the Spanish tickler waited on iron hooks. It wasn't sharp, not exactly. 4 curved metal claws welded to a handle. It looked more like a garden tool than an instrument of torment. They called it the cat's paw. Its job? Not to maim, but to remind, to leave trails. It was used across shoulders, backs, sometimes thighs. Dragged slowly with paws to let each tine whisper its intent. But here's what's curious. It didn't always tear. Sometimes it simply scratched, just enough to say, "I'm here. I could go further." In some cases, it was used symbolically. The condemned would feel the cold metal press against the skin and confess before a single pull began. And afterward, the paw was cleaned, hung back on the wall, waiting, watching, like a cat on a ledge. Let your back relax now, light and untouched. If a claw leaves no wound, is it still remembered? Hey, friends, tonight we drift gently onto water. You're aboard a wooden ship, its sails full of wind. The sea is calm, the crew silent. This is where keel hauling took place, a maritime tradition more feared than cannon fire. The condemned sailor was tied with rope, hands bound. Then, slowly, he was lowered over one side of the ship and dragged beneath it, pulled across the keel, the barnacled belly of the boat. The process wasn't fast. It wasn't frenzied. It was ritual. Down, across, up. Maybe once, maybe more. The sea played its part. Salt in every cut, chill in every breath. And silence above, save for creaking wood. What makes keel hauling fascinating is its paradox. The ocean, a place of freedom, used here as a cage. The ship, once a home, becomes a circle of punishment. And when it was over, if they survived, they'd often return to duty. Quiet, changed, salt-soaked souls in wind-torn uniforms. Let the rhythm of the tide lull you now. Would you trust water if it once held you under? Close your eyes gently and picture a simple tool, a carpenter's saw. Nothing unusual, just wood and metal. Now imagine 15th century Spain, where this saw had another job, one used rarely, yet deliberately. The victim was tied upside down, feet skyward, head downward. Why? So the blood would pool in the brain. It kept them awake, conscious, clear. Then the saw began, from between the legs, downward, but slowly, deliberately. The goal was not death. It was to delay it. This was often reserved for thieves or traitors, not for the crime, but for the message. A statement in wood and steel. What's haunting is how ordinary the saw was. Not a tool forged for cruelty, just repurposed. The same kind that built homes, used to unmake lives. A reminder, what builds can also break. Let your limbs rest now, light and warm. What else, once made for good, has been used for silence? Tonight's tale brings us to 17th century England, where taverns echoed with laughter, and sometimes scorn. The drunkard's cloak was not sharp, not cruel, just humiliating. It was a barrel, hollowed out, worn like a tunic. The town drunk was placed inside, arms poking through, legs waddling beneath. Then, a walk through town, public display, silent shame. Children pointed. Women laughed behind fans. Men looked away. It was meant not to hurt the body, but the pride. And yet, in the stillness of the night, the cloak remained heavy. Wooden, suffocating in summer, chilling in winter. Some say it worked. Others say it broke spirits more than habits. What lingers is the image. A man shaped like a cask, clunking down the cobbled lane, alone inside a barrel of judgment. Now feel the air around you, soft, invisible, unshaped. If ridicule has weight, how do we carry it? Hey friends, let's return to the town square. Cobblestones warm underfoot, bell tower tolling in the distance. Here stands the pillory, a wooden post with 2 hinged planks, holes carved for neck and hands, a stage of stillness. The condemned would be locked in, bent forward, head bowed, not in pain, but in pause. Sometimes they stood for hours, sometimes days, exposed to the weather, to words, to thrown fruit, or worse, indifference. What's haunting here isn't injury. It's isolation, the stillness, the ache in shoulders, the numbness in wrists, the time to think. And yet, some found power in it. They smiled, they sang, they endured. The pillory became not just punishment, but protest. The wood didn't care, it held all the same. Let your shoulders drop now, free and light. If forced stillness teaches reflection, what might your own silence reveal? Near a quiet English pond, a wooden beam juts out over the water. Attached, a seesaw plank, a chair. This is the ducking stool, used mostly for women. Gossips, scolds, accused witches. It wasn't meant to kill, just to frighten, to cleanse. The woman would be tied to the chair, gently lowered into the water. Held, lifted, lowered again, over and over. Sometimes the crowd laughed. Sometimes they watched in reverent silence. It wasn't the drowning they feared, it was the judgment. Who decided when to lift the stool, when to stop? In some villages, the ducking stool sat unused for years, its chains rusted, its wood dry. But it always remained, just in case. Now imagine the surface of that pond. Glass still, save for a ripple. Would you speak louder, knowing water waited for your silence? You're now in a French courtyard, 17th century. The morning is cool. The air smells of ash and lavender. In the center stands the wooden horse, a triangular beam pointed at the top, balanced on legs. It looks like a saddle, but it cuts, not carries. The condemned was made to straddle it, legs on either side, weights tied to their ankles. The longer they sat, the deeper the pressure. Skin split, tendons strained. But here's the secret. It wasn't always used. Sometimes it just sat there, visible, looming. Its power lay not in use, but in potential. Soldiers who defied orders, prisoners who mocked the guard. Anyone could be told, "Sit on the horse." And the silence that followed said everything. Now, as your legs stretch under a soft blanket, what is the weight of warning when never spoken? Hey friends, if you've enjoyed this quiet journey so far, remember to subscribe for more. Every whisper from history is waiting, and we're only just beginning. Hey friends, settle in. Our story tonight drifts toward shadowed docks and moonlit waves. Though often tied to early 20th century America, the idea of cement shoes reaches back further, to ancient Rome's concrete experiments and dark Venetian canals. The modern myth belongs to organized crime, but the truth? Quiet, efficient, almost sculptural. The victim's feet would be placed in a metal bucket or wooden box. Wet cement was poured in slowly, thick, gray, cold to the skin. It hardened over hours, not rushed, not loud, just patient. And then, the journey to water. Still, deep, echoing with silence, a splash. Then stillness again. What's haunting is the permanence. A body held down not by chains, but by stone. An anchor made by human hands. Cement doesn't care who it touches. It molds, it cools, it keeps. Now let your own feet relax, light and unbound. What would it feel like to sink, not in fear, but in absolute stillness? You are now walking through a quiet eastern monastery. Lanterns glow, and the scent of old parchment fills the halls. Hidden in a back room sits something unexpected. A tall wooden chair. Not grand, not gold, just solid and still. This, dear listener, was the chair of confession. Not for prayer, but for persuasion. Used in various forms across Asia and Eastern Europe, the chair featured spikes, small, dull, persistent, embedded along the back, seat, and armrests. Not deep enough to kill, just enough to discomfort. To keep the body from rest, the accused would be placed here during long interrogations. They weren't tied. They simply learned not to move. A breath too quick, a shift too sudden. The spikes reminded them. Tea might be offered. Questions repeated. Hours passed. The room didn't change, but the mind did. Strangely, the chair taught clarity. In stillness, truths emerged, not always factual, but deeply felt. Let your own back lean gently against your pillow. If confession comes from discomfort, what does silence teach? Hey friends, come closer. Tonight, we visit 15th century Spain, where a tool rests like an incense burner. But it held no smoke. The lead sprinkler was shaped like a ladle, with a long handle and a perforated bulb at the end. It resembled something a priest might carry, and sometimes priests did. But instead of holy water, it held molten lead, or boiling oil, or pitch. Its function? Ritualistic. The bulb was dipped, lifted, and gently tilted, letting drops fall upon the accused. Not poured, not splashed, just drops. Each one a quiet punctuation. It wasn't about destruction. It was about ceremony. A pause, a question, a drop. Some say it wasn't used often. Some say it never was. But the tool exists. Its metal dark with memory. It's haunting how something so simple, so elegant, could become a sentence. Now imagine a drop of rain on your skin. Cool, soft, harmless. Can we ever truly know what a vessel once carried? Tonight, let's wander into an unexpected corner of history, one of laughter and endurance. In ancient China and later in medieval Europe, there was a method known as tickle torture. It sounds harmless. It begins that way. The victim's feet were tied, bare, washed, sometimes soaked in salt water. Then a goat or a person would begin. Slow licks, gentle brushes, feathers, fingertips, no wounds, no scars, just overstimulation. Laughter came first, then tears, then silence. It wasn't used to punish, but to extract truth. The theory was simple. Everyone breaks differently, and laughter, too long drawn, can turn to madness. Sometimes it was done in darkness, sometimes before a crowd, but always with a smile. What's curious is how something joyful became a tool for surrender. No iron, no fire, just giggles, stretched beyond comfort. Now, listen to the soft rustle of your blanket. What begins in joy, can it remain innocent? Hey friends, this one brings us to 17th century Germany, a time of superstition, a time of symbols. The breast ripper, or iron spider, was used primarily on women accused of grave sins, adultery, heresy, witchcraft. It was shaped like a claw, 4 curved prongs. It looked more like jewelry for giants. The metal was heated until glowing, then applied, pressed, not slashed, a symbolic unmaking, a mark left not just on skin, but on memory. Some say it wasn't always heated. Sometimes it was simply cold, icy, a reminder, a warning. What's striking is the way it mimicked nature. A spider, a claw, a mother's breast, turned weapon. Many versions exist, some elegant, some brutal, but all quiet, all personal. Let your chest rise and fall now, unburdened and whole. What symbols do we carry, and which ones do we survive? You're now descending into a cool stone cellar. The torches flicker, and in the center, a cage, small, open on one end. This method appeared across many eras, from Rome to the Tower of London. The concept was simple: a rat, a metal bucket, the body still. The bucket was placed against bare skin, the rat inside. Then heat was applied to the outer surface, just enough to stir panic. The rat, seeking escape, would only find one direction open. What makes this method haunting isn't the rat, it's the quiet, the waiting, the listening. A heartbeat versus tiny feet. Some victims screamed, some whispered prayers, others simply waited. What's chilling is how something so small, so ordinary, could inspire such elaborate dread. Now picture a field mouse in tall grass, scurrying, unseen. When fear takes a shape, does it ever truly shrink? Hey friends, tonight's tale touches the voice, the breath between thoughts. In Inquisitional Europe, particularly during witch trials and heretic hunts, a tool called the tongue-tierer appeared. Simple in form, 2 hooked arms, a scissor-like hinge, and a grip. Its purpose? Symbolic. The voice, accused of lies or blasphemy, would be silenced at the source. Sometimes the tool only threatened, its presence enough. A glint of steel beside whispered words, and strangely it was often polished, not rusted, maintained with care like a violin or pen. Records suggest it wasn't often used. Most victims confessed before it touched them. So much power in a threat, in the imagination. Now press your tongue gently to the roof of your mouth. Feel how soft it is, and how much it holds. What words would you guard if silence meant survival? You are now in ancient Assyria, where justice was carved, not spoken. The flaying knife was thin, curved, honed for precision. But it wasn't used in frenzy. It was used in ceremony, in law, in decree. It said that enemies of the state were skinned not in anger, but in order, layer by layer, observed by scribes, watched by kings. The ritual was meant to strip identity. A body without its covering was a soul revealed. Tapestries show it. Tablets record it. But it was never loud. The knife whispered. It sang across the surface, and when it was done, the skin was often hung on gates, on walls as a lesson, not of pain, but permanence. Let your own skin breathe now, safe and whole. If the surface defines us, what lies beneath? Hey friends, tonight we walk a forest path. The moon is high and the trees stand still. Throughout history, across cultures, there existed sacred trees. Not for worship, but for punishment. Tied against bark, the condemned met the whip in ritual. In Rome, in Japan, even in colonial America, the whipping tree stood not as torment, but as justice. Nature bore witness. Leaves rustled. Birds fled. But the tree remained. Some say trees remember, that each scar stays, hidden deep within the rings. What's odd is how often the condemned returned later, older, slower, placing a hand against the trunk. Remembering, the tree did nothing, yet it changed everything. Now, imagine resting your hand against old bark, rough, warm, alive. What memories are carved in the wood around us? Take a breath. Tonight, you wear nothing but warmth. But centuries ago, one might awaken with iron around the throat. The iron collar was used across medieval Europe and into the colonies, not to choke, but to constrain. A ring of metal, sometimes with spikes inward, often not. It fastened with a bolt, held firm, marked the wearer. In towns, the collar identified the shamed, thieves, rebels, dissidents. In some cases, it was padlocked with no key. The wearer became the key, until forgiven. Some were ornate, etched with words. Others, plain as silence. What lingered was not the weight, but the sound, the creak of iron with every turn of the head. A constant reminder. Now feel the lightness of your own throat. No burdens, no chains. If a voice wears metal, does it speak differently? Hey friends, dim the lights and picture a small wooden bench, the kind you might sit on beneath an old tree. The garrote was not about spectacle. It was about efficiency. A quiet ending behind stone walls, often in the early morning. Used in Spain and its colonies for centuries, it featured a seat, a post, and a metal collar. The accused would sit. A screw was positioned behind the neck. One turn, two, and stillness. Some were public, some private, but always methodical. There was no blade, no flame, no crowd gasping, just a turning of the wheel. For many, it was an alternative to more violent ends. A mercy, they said. In later years, it evolved. Cushioned seats, metal frames, even footrests. Some historians called it clinical, others ceremonial. But the truth is, it was quiet, final, and the chair always waited. Now, lean your head back gently on your pillow. What stories do chairs hold when no one sits in them anymore? You're walking now through the ruins of an old fortress. Moss on stone. Wind slipping through cracked doors. And inside, a single chain bolted to the wall. Iron shackles, simple, familiar, cruel in their simplicity. Used across centuries and continents, shackles didn't inflict pain directly. They limited it, contained it, held the body still while the mind wandered. They were heavy, cold. They clinked with every breath. A kind of music, monotonous, mechanical. In some places, prisoners wore them for weeks. In others, years. The skin beneath would harden, or soften, depending on how the weight was carried. What makes them haunting isn't their design. It's their silence, the way they held without striking. Sometimes shackles were left behind, rusted rings in cave walls, iron cuffs buried in sand, as if even time couldn't break them. Now listen for silence in your own room. No chains, no echoes. If freedom makes no sound, how do we know we have it? Hey friends, let's shrink down tonight into something small, about the size of a walnut. The thumbkin, or thumbscrew, was used throughout Scotland and Germany during the 17th century. It was a miniature vice, often made of brass or steel, designed not to harm the body, but the will. The victim's thumb, or sometimes all fingers, would be placed inside. Then the screw turned, slowly. Each quarter turn added pressure. No sudden pain, just an increasing hum under the skin. The joints swelled, the bones whispered, but there was no blood, no scream, only quiet resolve, or its unraveling. It was often used in courtrooms. During questioning, a judge would nod, a guard would turn the screw, a confession might follow. And yet, its size made it forgettable, pocket-sized cruelty. Now wiggle your fingers gently, light, unbroken, free to move. What truths live between your joints, waiting for the right pressure? You're standing beside a weathered church door. A wind passes, and there, hanging by an iron hook, is the scold's bridle. Used mainly in Britain between the 16th and 18th centuries, it was a metal mask, a cage, really, fitted over the head, with a plate, a tongue piece, that pressed against the mouth. It didn't cut, it didn't choke, it silenced. And often used on women deemed too loud or disruptive, the bridle was both punishment and parade. Worn in public, walked through town, a lesson made visible. Some were adorned, bells on the top to draw attention. Others were plain, cold iron. But what's most haunting? The thought of being heard, but not allowed to speak. In some places, these bridles were ceremonial, in others, personal. Some were even passed down, like shame made heirloom. Let your lips part softly now, free to speak or stay still. If silence is forced, can it ever be peace? Hey friends, tonight's story is made not of metal, but of fiber. The braided rope was a common sight across Asia and the Middle East. It wasn't used to bind. It was used to sting. Twisted cords soaked in salt water, then dried under the sun until they hardened like reeds. When used, the rope would sing through the air, whistling. But it didn't slash like a whip. It slapped. It pressed. It bruised in layers over time. And the body, strangely, adjusted. The first strike startled. The 10th simply throbbed. In some regions, the rope was perfumed. Lavender, cedar, as if to soften the experience with scent. It wasn't seen as cruelty. It was seen as cleansing, a ritual before trial, a passage through pain. Now imagine rope coiled on a table, neat, quiet, unassuming. What stories can a thread tell once it's been pulled? You are stepping softly into a Hessian prison, 18th century. The hall is quiet, and inside a cabinet, a device of steel, leather, and silence. The iron gag was placed in the mouth, shaped like a bit. It held the tongue flat, pressed the jaw, buckled tightly around the back of the head. Its purpose was not pain, it was prevention, to stop speaking, to stop biting, to still the voice entirely. Prisoners who resisted orders or bit guards might be fitted with it. Some wore it for hours, others days. It caused no lasting harm, but its presence lingered, the way silence does. The gag became a symbol, not of punishment, but control. Control over sound, over defiance, over breath. Now, part your lips gently. Feel the freedom in your own mouth. What would you say if you only had one word left? Hey friends, tonight we drift toward a field, empty save for one strange figure. The coffin cage was exactly as it sounds, a human-sized iron cage, shaped like a standing coffin. It wasn't enclosed. It didn't pierce. It simply held. The condemned was locked inside, unable to sit, to lie, to stretch, exposed to wind, sun, and time. Sometimes used in Germany, France, and England during the Middle Ages, the cage was a sentence of waiting, for forgiveness, for dehydration, for attention. But often it stood empty. Just the sight of it was enough. Some towns hung them from poles. Others buried them halfway in the ground, half man, half warning. What remains is the image, a figure in silhouette, still as metal as night fell around them. Now stretch your arms freely, turn where you wish. If confinement holds no walls, is it still a cage? You are now entering a quiet chamber in Renaissance Italy. A single candle flickers. A bucket drips, softly, rhythmically. Water torture, also known as the Chinese water method, was elegantly simple. The victim was restrained, and from above a droplet would fall. On the forehead, the same spot, over and over. It did not bruise, did not burn. It simply repeated. Drop, drop, drop. After hours or days, the sensation built. The mind raced. The body flinched. And still, the water continued. What's fascinating is how gentle the tool was. Just water, just gravity, just time. Some endured, others begged. Many never truly recovered. All from something we bathe in. Drink, trust. Now, listen to your own heartbeat, steady, droplet-like. How much repetition does it take to become unbearable? Hey, friends, tonight we lower ourselves into the cool cellar of a feudal manor. In the corner sits a familiar shape, two thick boards joined by hinges. A hole for the neck, two for the wrists, the iron stock. It was used not to injure, but to display. A position of discomfort. The body bent, the head low, exposed. Sometimes it was used for a few hours, other times overnight, in public squares, in castle basements, in empty halls. There was no sound, just stillness, the ache of held posture. Some prisoners sang, others wept, a few fell asleep, standing. The stock held many, rich and poor, guilty and innocent. It did not choose. It only held. Now fold your arms across your chest, comfortably. What lessons are learned when we are forced to pause? You are now standing at the edge of a cobbled village square. A strange sight rolls into view. A man wearing a barrel. The barrel pillory was used primarily in medieval Germany. The accused, often drunkards or thieves, were placed into an empty cask, feet sticking through the bottom, arms bound, head exposed. Then they were made to walk, or stumble, or be led. The punishment wasn't physical, it was social. Laughter followed them, children pointed, elders frowned. Sometimes the barrel was painted, sometimes carved with insults. The goal? Embarrassment. But many bore it with pride, mocked the mockers, turned shame into theater. And after a few hours, the barrel came off. The memory remained. Now feel the air around your body. Light, free, undefined. What shape would you wear if others named it for you? Hey friends, if you're still with us, floating gently through time's darker corners, thank you. Don't forget to subscribe, so these stories keep finding you, night after night. Hey friends, tonight we rest our thoughts inside a quiet German castle, where stone halls echo with almost nothing. The Judas chair is sometimes confused with the Judas cradle, but this chair was flatter, broader. It looked like an ordinary wooden seat until closer inspection. The entire surface was lined with tiny spikes, thousands of them, along the backrest, the arms, the seat itself. No blade, no blood, just discomfort. Waiting. The accused was placed upon it gently, ropes around the wrists, ankles, shoulders. Sometimes a small fire was lit underneath, not to burn, just to warm, to stir the skin. But here's the quiet truth. The pain didn't begin immediately. It came slowly. Minutes passed, then hours. Each breath moved the body just enough for the spikes to whisper. No screams, just pressure, just patience. Some prisoners fainted from the weight of stillness. Others never moved at all. They now shift in your seat, soft cushions, smooth fabric. What happens when a place meant for rest demands stillness instead? You're walking now through a quiet barn. Wooden beams above, dust in the air, and tucked in the corner, a strange bench. The wooden trestle, also called a chevalet, wasn't built to comfort. It had a narrow top edge, sharp enough to press but not cut. The accused would be straddled atop it, ankles tied, weights added slowly to their legs. No slicing, no chains, just gravity, just time. The legs would tremble, the hips ached, but the body stayed still. This method appeared in France and Italy, particularly during military interrogations. Some used it with iron bars instead of wood. Others added nothing at all, just the fear of falling forward. It was never rushed. The goal wasn't pain, it was submission. And when it ended, no scars, just soreness. The kind that lingers for days in silence. Let your legs stretch softly beneath the covers. Have you ever felt weight, not from the world, but from within? Hey friends, tonight we find ourselves near an old cathedral in Seville, where the sun is soft and the shadows long. The Spanish chair was a fixture of the Inquisition, not always used, but always there. It looked like an ordinary high-backed seat. But the wood was reinforced. The armrests were thick, and beneath them, iron fastenings. The accused would be seated calmly, strapped at wrists, ankles, chest. Sometimes a fire would be lit beneath, sometimes not. The chair did not strike. It held. It confined. The heat rose slowly, warmed the metal, pressed against the spine. No burns, just sweat, just fear, just the hum of heat and breath again. What made the Spanish chair so haunting was its disguise, a place of reflection turned into one of resistance. When it was over, the chair was cleaned, covered, ready for the next. Now lean back into your own chair, safe, quiet, kind. How often do the ordinary things hold extraordinary memories? You're now entering a tiled courtyard in the Middle East. Ottoman sun overhead, sandals on stone, and a long cane resting nearby. The bastinado, or foot whipping, was used across many cultures, from Persia to China. It was focused, efficient, and oddly precise. The accused would be bound, soles exposed. Then the strikes began, not furious but methodical. 1, then 2, then 10. On the softest part of the body, the place that meets the ground day after day. The pain built like thunder, rolling, not crashing. Some used reeds, others bamboo. Some preferred leather. But the result was the same: swollen soles, trembling steps, and sometimes revelations. And yet, the victim could walk again, run, dance. The body forgave. The memory did not. Now press your feet softly into the bed beneath you. If pain begins where we walk, does healing begin where we rest? Hey, friends. Tonight's story begins in a dusty European garrison. Leather boots echo on stone, and behind a curtain, a table with tools. The spiked mace wasn't always used in battle. In some places, especially in early Eastern Europe, it became a symbol of truth, or what power believed to be truth. The accused's limbs, usually arms or thighs, were struck gently with the mace, not to shatter, not to bleed, just enough to bruise, to jolt, to awaken nerves dulled by silence. Each blow was spaced, like footsteps in snow. The weight between them, often worse than the impact. This wasn't frenzy, it was rhythm, a dance between will and warning. The mace was polished after use, always. Let your arms lie still now, free, unmarked. If truth can be asked with a whisper, why is it sometimes demanded with iron? You are now beneath a vaulted ceiling in 15th century Florence. Ropes dangle from wooden beams. A single pulley creaks overhead. The strappado was elegantly simple. The accused's hands were tied behind their back, and the rope was looped upward, then lifted, slowly, until the body hung by the wrists alone. The pain wasn't immediate, but over minutes the shoulders pulled, dislocated, hummed with pressure. Sometimes they dropped the body, then caught it again. It was quiet, deliberate, a ballet of gravity. What's chilling is that many survived it, walked again, even spoke again, but something in them remained suspended. The strappado didn't tear, it stretched, it listened. Now gently roll your shoulders. Feel their motion. What hangs from your past, waiting to be lowered. Hey, friends, tonight we look at something small, hidden in the archives of the Spanish Inquisition. The bone press was a compact device. It looked like a box. Inside, 2 flat plates. Between them, a hand, or a foot, or a thigh. Then the turn of a crank, slowly, evenly, the bones compressed, but not crushed, not always. The goal was silence. After the third turn, perhaps. Maybe the fourth. It wasn't used often, but it remained nearby, like a whispered warning. Sometimes the press was left open on a table beside an empty chair. The threat more powerful than the pain. Now clench your hand gently. Feel each bone, each ridge. What parts of us hold their shape under pressure? You're standing now at the edge of a castle tower. Behind a trapdoor? Darkness. A vertical shaft. Stone. Narrow. The oubliette, French for to forget, was not a room. It was a hole. A prison designed to be out of sight, out of mind. The accused was lowered in, or sometimes dropped. There was no space to lie down, barely enough to sit. No light, no sound, no calendar, only time. Some oubliettes had grates above, letting crumbs fall. Others were sealed entirely. There were no guards, no chains, just walls and silence. The most haunting part? Some prisoners were never meant to die there, but to be remembered only when convenient. Now close your eyes and imagine complete stillness. If no one sees you, do you remain? Hey friends, tonight we return to iron, but not to hold, to remind. The hot iron collar was used in West Africa and later in colonial regimes. It was heated, not red hot, just enough to burn memory into flesh, then clamped around the neck. The mark remained, a ring, a reminder of ownership, of rebellion, of capture. It was not fatal, not fast, but it lingered. In some villages, collars were worn until removed by a key, sometimes never found. What remains is the symbol, the circle, unending, quiet. Now touch your throat lightly, feel your breath pass freely. If a mark is hidden, does it still shape how we carry ourselves? You are now in a dark alcove beneath an Iberian monastery. A tool lies beneath glass. Small, curved, quiet. The Spanish spider was a device with curved hooks, usually used on the body's limbs or chest. It wasn't swung. It was pressed, branded, clamped. Sometimes heated, sometimes not. It served no purpose but to mark, to scar, to speak through the skin. Some say it was shaped like a spider to invoke fear. Others to mimic nature's quietest hunter. It never struck twice. It only needed once. And after it was used, it was cleaned, wrapped, hidden again. Now rest your arms at your sides. Soft, whole. What stories would your skin tell if it could remember touch? Hey friends, take a deep breath and step into a candlelit chapel in 13th century France. Flagellation was not always punishment. Sometimes it was penance, a spiritual act of cleansing. A long leather cord, divided into several strands, would strike the back, softly at first. A monk might chant, a choir might hum. The rhythm wasn't anger, it was ritual. Used in monasteries and during certain pilgrimages, flagellation was a means of beating sin from the body. Some even performed it upon themselves, slowly, thoughtfully, eyes closed. The room was often silent. A fire might crackle in the corner, and afterward, warm cloth, healing balm, a whispered prayer. The body didn't break, it remembered. Some flags were adorned with tiny knots, others with wooden beads. Every community had its variation, but the spirit remained the same. Now feel the warmth of your blanket around your shoulders. If pain was once devotion, what soothes you back into grace? You are now inside a noble's chamber, somewhere in 17th century Florence. The room smells of lavender oil and melted beeswax. On the table sits a silver candle holder. Beside it, a small spoon. At first glance, nothing sinister. Dripping wax was a method of persuasion. Drops of hot wax would fall, not to burn deeply, but to startle. One drop on the hand, then the wrist, then the chest. The pain was brief, the anticipation longer. Used mostly during interrogations, it wasn't intended to destroy, just to unsettle. The silence between drops became the loudest voice in the room. Some candles were scented, rose, myrrh. The air was sweet, even as the skin flinched. The wax cooled instantly, hardened, trapped memory like a fossil in amber, and after the session, the wax peeled off in soft flakes, like petals from a dying flower. Let your skin breathe freely now, unmarked and cool. What lingers longer, heat or hesitation? Hey friends, tonight we step into the bowels of an old fortress where water drips and walls remember. The water dungeon wasn't built to break the body. It was designed to dissolve time. These chambers were carved beneath castles, sometimes below sea level. Water trickled constantly, a few inches deep, sometimes cold, sometimes warm, always damp. Prisoners were left to sit or stand for days. The water never stopped. Skin softened, feet swelled, mind wandered. There was no sound but the droplets, no light but the occasional torch, no visitors, just the echo of one's own breath. Food came irregularly, sleep came briefly, voices came only in dreams. Some left the dungeon broken, others enlightened. Many wrote later of hallucinations, visions that came through the rhythm of dripping. Now listen to your own room, dry, still. How loud must water be when it never stops falling? You are walking through a foggy Scottish village, cobblestones beneath you. A wind rustles your coat, and above a door frame hangs a brank. The brank, or gossip's bridle, was worn by those, usually women, accused of speaking too freely. A cage for the head, a small iron tongue pressed into the mouth, and atop it, a bell. Every movement rang out. Every step declared shame. There was no hiding, no silence. The brank made sure of that. Sometimes it was paraded, sometimes stationary, always humiliating. Yet, over time, some turned it into defiance, wore it like armor, walked proudly. Let the bell sing louder. Today, a few branks remain in museums, rusted, hollow, but still echoing. Now tilt your head gently. No weight, no sound. If a bell rings and no one shames you, does it still accuse? Hey friends, tonight we dock quietly in a British harbor. Wooden ships, salt air, and a tool hanging from a naval belt. The cat-o'-nine-tails was a whip. 9 knotted cords tied to a leather handle. Used aboard ships, it wasn't rage. It was routine. Discipline, correction. The whip struck the back. 1 lash for disobedience, 3 for drunkenness, 9 for desertion. Some captains recorded every strike in a logbook. Others didn't need to. The memory stayed on the skin. Sailors learned to hold their breath, to stand tall, to count silently. And when it was done, the deck was scrubbed, salted, sanitized. Life resumed. The sea forgave. Some sailors kept fragments of the whip as tokens. Others threw it overboard the moment they returned to land. Now breathe in deeply. Imagine the sea air. If order comes by knots, how many do we untie to be free? You're stepping through an American plantation now, under the stillness of a southern sky. The iron bit was not a weapon. It was a silence. A mask, simple iron, was fitted over the lower face with a flat plate resting behind the teeth. The wearer could breathe, but not speak, not eat, not cry out. Used on enslaved people, it was designed for control. A day, sometimes more. The bit grew hot in the sun, heavy in the rain, and still many endured, returned, resisted, if only in breath. Some whispered prayers behind it. Others chewed through their own stillness. In museums now, the iron bit sits behind glass, quiet, but never forgotten. Now feel the air on your lips, unrestricted yours. If your voice was taken, would you still find a way to speak? Hey friends, tonight's tale begins in 16th century Germany, where music met discipline. The shrew's fiddle, or neck violin, was a wooden device fitted around the neck and wrists. It held the arms out, forward, rigid, like holding an invisible book. But this wasn't for music. It was for silence. Sometimes 2 people were locked into one, facing each other, forced to reconcile. Villagers watched, children laughed. The fiddle remained. It didn't cut, didn't burn. It just held until tempers cooled or apologies were whispered. Afterward, it was placed back on the wall, a reminder, not a sentence. Now stretch your arms, fold them in, rest them easily. If reconciliation is forced, is it ever finished? You are now on a quiet patch of English grass near an old manor. A large wooden drum sits in the clearing. This is the whirligig, a barrel-like structure with a seat inside. The accused would be placed within and spun. Fast, relentless, not to punish the body, but the senses, used on women who quarreled too loudly, or men who drank too much. It wasn't about pain. It was about dizziness, disorientation, humbling. 10 spins, then 20. Sometimes more, and when it stopped, the world did not. The sky kept turning. Some emerged laughing, others wept. A few never found their balance again. Now let your head lie still, anchored. If the world spins too fast, do we remember where we started? Hey friends, tonight we walk through a German village square where an empty wine barrel rests on its side. The barrel of shame was worn, not rolled. The bottom removed. Holes cut for arms and legs. The wearer, usually drunkards or petty thieves, was paraded through the town. The barrel heavy, the meaning heavier. Sometimes slogans were painted, sometimes jokes, but the message was always clear. Afterward, the barrel was reused. For wine, for grain, for someone else. But for the wearer, its shape stayed in the shoulders. Now, breathe freely, uncontained. What shame do we carry, even after it's been emptied? You are standing at the base of a tall tower, eyes lifted to a cage swaying in the breeze. The hanging cage was not unique to one culture. It appeared in Italy, in England in the Ottoman Empire. A metal frame, just large enough to hold a person standing. It didn't kill. It displayed. Left in the open, on towers, bridges, trees, the body was exposed to sun, wind, rain, and time. Some were hung posthumously, others while still alive. The goal was not suffering. It was message. And when the wind blew, the cage creaked, like a lullaby made of rust and bones. Now listen to your own breath, unshaped by iron. If your silhouette hung in the sky, what would it say? Dear listeners, if these whispers from the past help you drift gently into the quiet, don't forget to subscribe. There are many more shadows waiting, calmly, patiently. Hey friends, tonight we find ourselves in the bitter cold. Northern Siberia, early 20th century. The icebox wasn't a box at all. It was a cell built with no fire, no insulation, and no voice. A room meant not to harm, but to chill. Used in gulags and other remote prisons, the accused would be sent in, clothed or half-dressed, depending on the season. No whipping, no chains, just cold. Sometimes the prisoner would pace, counting steps, exhaling clouds. Other times they stood still. Let the cold speak for itself. After an hour, maybe two, the body would tremble. Lips would press tight to hold heat. Every breath became deliberate. Every blink slower. The goal wasn't frostbite. It was mental erosion. Cold was cleaner than blood, quieter. And afterward, a blanket felt like salvation, a bowl of broth like a second life. Now pull your own covers closer. Feel the warmth return. If punishment comes without touch, can it still reach the soul? You are in a quiet Scottish castle now. The fire is low. Shadows stretch along stone walls, and on the table rests a box, no larger than a loaf of bread. The pillywinks, or thumbscrews, were not exclusive to the fingers. They came in all sizes, designed for wrists, toes, even knees. 2 plates, a turning screw, no blood, just gradual compression, the kind that unfolds slowly, like a tight bud in reverse. Used during the Scottish witch trials and beyond, the pillywinks were not quick. They were contemplative. Each twist asked a question. Each creak of metal waited for an answer. Some victims stayed silent. Others answered too quickly. But what lingers is the intimacy. How such a small tool could speak so loudly. Now curl your hands gently into your chest. No pressure, no iron. What truths hide inside us, too delicate to squeeze. Hey friends, dim the lights and walk softly through the chambers of Renaissance Spain. The Spanish tickler was not a feathered toy. It was a clawed tool, 4 curved prongs shaped like fingers. It didn't cut deeply. It raked, slowly, intentionally. Sometimes heated, often not. Used more as threat than tool. It might be dragged across the back, or chest, or arms, during questioning, or as post-sentencing ritual. The pain was not sharp, but cumulative. And it wasn't always used. Just seeing it on the table was enough. Shiny, polished, patient. Some say its name was a cruel joke. Others say it reminded the accused that humor, too, can hold danger. Now let your skin relax beneath your blanket. Smooth, cool, safe. What names do we give to things when we want them to sound harmless? You are standing at the edge of a still pond in 17th century England. Willow trees lean. The wind brushes the surface. This is no ordinary pond. It's a ducking pond, used in cases of gossip, witchcraft, or defiance. A wooden chair extends from a beam above the water. The accused was strapped in, lowered, submerged, lifted again. The water was cold, the sky indifferent. The purpose? Confession, submission, or spectacle. Some duckings lasted minutes, others far longer. There were no screams, only coughing, gasping, dripping silence. What makes it haunting isn't the act, but the laughter that often surrounded it. The crowd treated it like theater, the pond like a stage. Now close your eyes and picture still water, glassy, gentle. If silence floats on water, what sinks beneath? Hey friends, tonight we wander into feudal Japan, narrow alleys, silk robes, and a tool that never shouted. The man-catcher looked like a crescent moon on a pole, two curved arms with spikes on the inside. It wasn't designed to hurt. Not directly. It was used to restrain. Guards would press it against the throat or waist, push the body to the ground, hold it there, or pin it upright against a wall. It was used on samurai who refused surrender, on rioters, on escapees. But it wasn't about violence. It was about efficiency. A tool that spoke with firmness, not force. Some versions were gilded, others plain wood and iron. Today it survives in museums, oddly elegant, almost decorative. Now imagine being held, firm but unharmed. If a tool doesn't cut, can it still conquer? You are now in a British colonial classroom, 1900s, wooden desks, chalk dust, and beside the teacher's bench, a slender cane. Caning was less about damage than rhythm. One strike, then another, measured, precise. It was used on palms, thighs, sometimes the back. The sound louder than the pain. But both lingered. Students learned to count the strokes, to brace, to flinch without moving. The cane was polished, passed down. Some bore inscriptions, dates, names, even carved initials. Sometimes those punished became caners themselves. The cycle silent, the rhythm familiar, and after the strike, a return to silence, to books, to stillness. Now rest your hands in your lap, warm, whole. If a lesson is delivered in pain, does it echo longer? Hey friends, tonight we visit medieval France, where a prisoner stands, still upright, in what seems like prayer. The stork was a binding position, ankles tied, wrists bound behind the back, body bent slightly forward. No instruments, just posture. It mimicked the stance of a stork, still awkward, statuesque. The discomfort came not from impact, but from time. The longer one held the pose, the more the body begged for rest. Knees shook, shoulders ached, but still, no permission to fall. Used to break the will without breaking the skin. What's striking is how calm it looked. From a distance it seemed peaceful. Now sit as you like, shift freely. What part of us aches when it's told not to? You are inside a 17th century dungeon now. Dim candlelight, the scent of stone and oil. The iron finger screws were compact, portable. 2 iron plates, threaded with a screw. Insert 1 finger. Turn. Wait. Used for interrogation, 1 digit at a time. The pain wasn't violent, just inevitable. It didn't tear. It pressed. Bones whispered before they cracked, but rarely needed to. The mere sight of the device often opened mouths, or sealed them tighter. Some were padded, ironically, meant to apply pressure, politely. Now press your fingers together gently. What knowledge would you guard? One joint at a time. Hey friends, tonight's story begins in the Persian court. Music drifting, silks rustling, and a curious object in a servant's hand. The iron flute was not played, it was worn. A hollow tube of metal clamped around the neck and lower face. The mouth was forced open, held in mid-note. Sometimes given to liars, sometimes to singers who offended royalty. It looked like an instrument, soundless, and when worn in public, it was a reminder. Not all songs are welcomed, not all voices applauded. Some flutes were ornate, others simple, but none made music. Now part your lips gently, freely. If a song is silenced at the mouth, does it still echo in the mind? You are now in colonial America. Early morning, damp soil and a triangle of wooden posts lashed together. The whipping triangle was a structure, nothing more, but it held meaning. The accused would be tied, arms outstretched across the top, back exposed. The triangle did nothing. It only waited, held the form, presented the moment. Lashes came slow, regular, sometimes counted aloud, and after the punishment, the triangle remained, empty, upright, silent. Some say it was left visible on purpose, to remind. Now rest your shoulders into your pillow. If a shape can carry pain, what forms have we outgrown? Hey friends, tonight we find ourselves in 18th century Bavaria. You step into a dim room where nothing moves, except the whisper of turning gears. The bone crusher wasn't theatrical, it was clinical. This large wooden frame held the arms or legs in place while a screw press, like an old wine press, lowered slowly. Not to snap in one strike, but to squeeze. The sound wasn't a crack, it was a sigh, the slow yield of bone to pressure. Records describe it not as punishment, but persuasion, used rarely, and only when words failed. The device was adjusted carefully. No pain was wasted, and many never made it past the third turn. But the detail that lingers, the operator's silence. He didn't shout. He watched, measured, waited. Now let your limbs rest weightlessly. What happens to strength when it's asked to endure stillness? You're now in Renaissance Venice, where perfumes floated through canals and masks adorned every face. Feather and oil may sound like a spa treatment, but in the courts of gossip and scandal, they became something else. A person might be stripped, doused in oil, olive, almond, even rose, and then brushed with feathers. It didn't hurt, not at first, but under sun the oil attracted insects. The feathers clung. The shame multiplied. Used more as humiliation than pain, the process was public, celebratory even. A parade of laughter around one silent figure. Sometimes the punishment ended in laughter, sometimes in isolation, but always it lingered in memory. Now run your fingers through your hair, clean, untangled. What clings longer, shame or scent? Hey friends, tonight we travel east, to ancient China, where serenity coexisted with strictness. The wooden collar, also called the congwe, was not violent. It was visible. A heavy wooden board, about the size of a tabletop, was fastened around the neck. The prisoner could breathe, speak, but barely move. Eating required assistance. Sleeping was upright. Walking, if allowed, was slow and swaying. Most wore it for days, some for weeks. The idea wasn't suffering, it was presence. You became your punishment. Everyone saw it. Few spoke of it. Messages were sometimes painted across the wood. Names, crimes, prayers. Today, replicas hang in museums, eerily silent. Now feel the lightness of your own neck. If a burden doesn't cut, does it still leave a mark? You are now stepping quietly through an iron forge in 16th century France. The air smells of soot, and beneath a workbench rests the knee splitter. This device had 2 metal bars lined with spikes. The knee, flexed or straight, was placed between them. Then the screws turned. But slowly, each rotation a conversation, each spike a sentence, used sparingly, intentionally, especially for accusations of desertion or betrayal. Sometimes it didn't pierce, just pressed, left bruises, echoes. Other times the tool sat unused, just visible, heavy with implication. Now press your knees together, solid, safe. What does it mean to be split not by force, but by choice? Hey, friends, let's drift now to 17th century Korea. You're standing in a courtyard garden where the air smells of pine and the ground is swept clean. There, beside a guard, sits a curious object, a hollow wooden drum. But this wasn't played with sticks. It was worn, strapped to the back or chest. Inside, pebbles, shards, anything that made sound. The accused was made to walk through the streets. Each movement rattled, loud, inevitable. It wasn't pain that punished. It was the attention. Children followed. Elders turned away. The sound did all the speaking. Some wore it for hours, others a single lap through town. And when it ended, the drum was emptied and stored away. Now listen to the silence around you. If sound becomes shame, can silence become safety? You are entering an 18th century asylum now. The halls are hushed. One wooden chair sits beneath a window, a peculiar one. The spiked wheelchair didn't look sinister. A few dull points embedded into the seat and arms. Not to pierce, just to discourage movement. The patient, or prisoner, was placed gently, strapped in, encouraged to sit still. That's all. Some remained there for hours. Some rocked slowly, each shift a prick, a reminder to remain calm. It wasn't for punishment necessarily, but for control. When released, the skin bore no scars, but the mind often did. Now feel the softness beneath you. What kind of stillness do we choose? And what kind is chosen for us? Hey, friends, tonight we travel to ancient India, where philosophy and punishment sometimes shared a seat. The ant chair was a low wooden seat, placed over an anthill. The accused sat upon it, lightly bound. Honey was applied, on arms, ankles, sometimes eyelids. Then nothing. Just time. Just nature. The ants emerged slowly, carried by curiosity, not commanded. Some stories say the accused confessed before the first bite. Others say they sat in silence, accepting the lesson. The chair was made of plain wood, unadorned, just large enough for one. And now imagine the stillness of your own room, free of creatures, crawling or otherwise. If pain walks slowly, do we notice its first steps? You are in 20th century Eastern Europe, behind a high wall and steel doors. The cement mask was a method used in prisons. A mold was placed over the face, forehead, nose, jaw. Then, a thin layer of wet cement was poured, carefully shaped, carefully held. As it hardened, it restricted vision, breathing, voice. It didn't last long, just a few hours. But in that time, the world shrank. Some called it psychological, others artistic. Once removed, it left no scar, but it changed the silence behind the eyes. Now close your eyes, breathe easily. What molds us when no one's watching? Hey friends, tonight's method doesn't strike, it listens. The whispering wall was part of an old monastery's design. Curved stone, built for acoustics. 2 prisoners placed at opposite ends. One was told to confess, the other to listen. But both whispered. Neither knew who was speaking truth. No tools, no violence, just words, drifting across silence. Some say confessions were false, others eerily accurate. The monks simply recorded. No judgment. The wall still stands in fragments, stones shaped by secrets. Now sit still and listen to nothing. What have you said, believing no one heard? You are in Ethiopia now, under a blazing sun. The iron yoke rests on bare shoulders. It's a crossbar, 2 iron arms fitted across the neck and wrists. It doesn't choke, it doesn't bind too tight, but it stays. It forces posture, prevents lying down, prevents hugging, prevents rest. Used for punishment or public display, it humbles more than hurts. Prisoners wore it through markets, through silence, through rain. Some smiled anyway, others stared forward. Now feel your shoulders, light, free to slump or sway. If your arms are held apart, where do your thoughts go? Dear listeners, we're just 20 stories from the final part. If these quiet shadows have kept you company tonight, remember to subscribe. Let's keep walking through history, slowly, softly, together. Hey, friends, tonight we stand in the courtyard of a Roman garrison. Cicadas buzzing, sandals tapping, and at the center, a tall stone pillar. The standing pillar was simple, a post, tall enough to reach the shoulders. The prisoner's arms would be tied above the head. The body stayed upright. No whip, no chains, no fire, just time. Sometimes it lasted an hour, sometimes longer. Legs shook, breath slowed, shoulders begged for rest. But the pillar remained still, solid, silent. In some cases, soldiers used it on each other for disobedience or delay, not with anger, but with routine. What makes it powerful is its lack of drama, a punishment you could walk away from, but never quite forget. Now stretch your arms, let them fall, free to move. If stone stands unmoved, what do we learn from holding still? You are now deep within a 16th century monastery in Spain. Lanterns glow. A wooden door closes behind you. The air is hazy. The smoke cell wasn't cruel by design, just narrow, windowless, and filled, slowly, with the smoke of damp wood or herbs. It wasn't intended to suffocate, just to overwhelm, to cloud the mind, to test endurance. The scent lingered, clove, pine, cedar, The smoke coiled through the room like a prayer unfinished. Prisoners were kept for an hour, sometimes less. The goal? A confession softened by fog. Some emerged sleepy, others wept. A few sang. Now take in a deep, clean breath. What happens when truth is carried by smoke? Hey friends, let's step quietly into a wind-blown English tower. You look up, and hanging from a rafter is the cradle cage. Unlike the coffin cage, this one rocked. Suspended by chains, it swayed slightly in the breeze, designed to keep the body alert, off balance, unsure. The accused was curled inside, knees tucked, back bent. Each motion made another. Sleep became slippery. No food, no fire, just movement. Sometimes it was placed over a fire, sometimes over nothing at all. But the motion, that was always there. Some found peace in the sway, most didn't. Now feel the stillness of your own bed. No sway, no chain. If motion never ends, can the mind find rest? You're now walking a dusty southern road in the late 1800s. Heat rises. In the distance, figures move in rhythm. The chain gang shackle was a single iron band, connected by a short link to another. And another. Dozens more. It didn't cut, it pulled. Each step forward relied on the steps beside you. One stumble, and all felt it. Used in prison labor, the chain wasn't the punishment. It was the reminder. That movement was no longer your own. Even the sound became routine. Clink, clink, clink. A metronome of captivity. Now wiggle your toes. Let your feet move freely. If every step is shared, who leads? Hey, friends. Tonight we return to medieval Europe. A cobbled street, a wooden gate, and from it, a faint ringing. The bell collar was worn like a necklace, thick iron with a single bell attached. Not heavy, just audible. Each movement sang, every nod, every glance. It was often used on runaways or repeat offenders. Not to stop them, but to announce them. The bell became a second voice, one they couldn't control. Over time, some forgot the sound was there. Others heard it long after it was removed. Now tilt your head gently, silent, free. If every motion made sound, would you still move? You are stepping into a warm stone chamber. Greek islands, 4th century BCE. The scent of brine fills the room. The salt bed was not made of cloth. It was a slab, stone or wood, soaked in concentrated seawater. The accused was laid upon it, sometimes with shallow cuts or open pores. The salt did the rest. It didn't burn quickly. It dried, tightened, pulled. Some spoke of dreams, visions, others only of thirst. Afterward, the body would be rinsed in fresh water, a small mercy. The bed remained, damp, waiting. Now feel the softness beneath you. No sting, no tension. What cleanses when it also clings? Hey friends, tonight we climb into a tower room, narrow, round, and cold. There's a cage inside, but shaped like an hourglass. The top half wider, the bottom tight. The accused stood, feet pressed together, arms stretched awkwardly. The design didn't hurt, not directly, but it offered no comfort. They shifted constantly, knees bent, spine twisted, breath shallow. Time passed slowly, like sand through glass. Some cages had markings, lines to track hours. Others had none, just echoes. Now rest your back against the wall. No pressure, no posture. If time shapes the body, What does stillness shape? You are now near the Black Forest. Night, snow, and inside a lodge. A mask rests beside a hearth. The fire mask was made of iron, sometimes brass. It covered the entire face, eyes, mouth, nose, heated gently over coals, then placed on the skin, not to scar, but to hold warmth. Too long. It didn't sizzle, just pressed. Slowly, a creeping discomfort. Some say it was symbolic, to burn away lies. Others, pure invention. But the mask remains in archives, smooth, empty, waiting. Now place your hand near a warm surface, not touching, just feeling. What does heat know that ice forgets? Hey, friends, tonight's story sways again. This time, over a canyon. The rope cradle was used in Andean communities, mostly for confession or judgment. A net of braided rope was suspended over a ravine. The accused lay inside, held aloft, exposed to wind, sun, birds. They weren't harmed, just suspended, between sky and stone. Sometimes they stayed for a day, sometimes just an hour. What punished wasn't height, it was perspective. Now lie back and imagine nothing beneath you. If the world holds you loosely, do you still fall? You are in a medieval dungeon now. Low light, thick air, and on a table, something that looks like a jaw. The cramp iron was placed across the legs, or the arms, or the shoulders. It didn't crush, it held. A bar across the joints, fastened tightly, forcing stillness. The ache grew slowly, muscle against metal, nerves humming. Sometimes it was used during sleep, to keep the body in one place. The iron was cold at first, then warm, then forgotten. Now stretch without effort. Let your limbs move. What quiet pain do we forget until we're free? Dear listeners, we've now reached 90. If you're still with us, floating through history's hush, thank you. One final chapter remains. Don't forget to subscribe, so you won't miss the last 10 shadows. Hey friends, tonight we return to a desert monastery in 6th century Egypt. The sun is low. The wind whispers through dry stone corridors. Weighted silence wasn't a device, it was a rule. Monks accused of breaking sacred vows were given a simple task: to carry a stone, not too heavy, not too light. They held it during prayers, during meals, during sleep. There was no chain, no guard, just the weight, and the expectation to never set it down. Some balanced it on their heads, others cradled it like a child. The stone didn't punish, it reminded, and over time the burden became invisible, as if it had always belonged. Now press your hand against your chest. What do you carry that no one else sees? You're walking through a quiet Japanese forest now. Bamboo sways, birds sing, and in the clearing, a tree with a hollowed trunk. The bleeding tree was used rarely. A prisoner would be placed inside, standing, the hollow sealed. Small vents let in air, and slowly, the tree's natural sap, thick and sticky, coated the body. It didn't strangle, it enveloped. Sometimes sharp splinters were placed within, sometimes not. The tree wasn't angry, just patient. When the sap hardened, the prisoner was removed, or not. Some say the tree remembered, that it darkened after each use. Now imagine bark beneath your fingers, rough, warm, still alive, What stories would trees tell if they had voices? Hey, friends, we've seen masks and collars, but tonight, something quieter. The cage hood was made of wire, thin, woven loosely, worn over the head like a veil. It didn't bind tightly, but it made the sleep difficult. Sound echoed oddly. Vision became a pattern of squares, worn for days, sometimes more. The goal wasn't pain. It was disorientation, to see the world always slightly divided. Some hoods were covered in bells, some painted with symbols, some plain as shadow. After removal, the world looked whole again, but only just. Now close your eyes. Let the shapes around you fade. What frames do we live within, without knowing? You're in 19th century Russia. Snow falls gently. The sky is iron gray. The freezing barrel was a punishment used in cold regions. A water barrel filled part way. The accused stood inside, barefoot. Then waited. The water chilled. The body adjusted. Then shivered. Then stiffened. It wasn't about death. It was about reflection. To stand alone, wet and still, while the wind told stories. Some lasted hours, some only minutes. Afterward, warm cloths, hot broth, if they returned. Now wrap your blanket tighter. Feel your toes warm and free. When cold surrounds, what stays warm inside? Hey friends, tonight's method sounds like music, but is not. Singing nails were thin strips of metal, nailed lightly into a board, then bowed like a violin string, while the accused held it. The sound was soft, high, uncomfortable. No pain, just vibration. It was used in ancient Persia and later in Spain. A ritual to shake the spirit. The notes entered the ears, echoed in the chest. Sometimes it induced visions, sometimes silence. Either result pleased the interrogator. The board still exists in a museum, scratched, faintly curved. Now hum a note softly to yourself. What sounds awaken memory, and which ones silence it? You're in a castle tower, night. A bell tolls once. The watchman's walk was not a tool, but a sentence. The accused, usually a guard who failed at his post, was told to walk. Circles, hallways, courtyards, for hours, days, sometimes longer. No rest, no sleep, no speech. His footsteps became his penance, a rhythm of guilt. Other guards passed him, nodded, never spoke. When it ended, he often returned to work. Changed, quieter. Now listen for your own footsteps, soft, unburdened. When we retrace our mistakes, what do we find? Hey friends, tonight's shadow is poetic. In Qing Dynasty China, the ink cage was used on scholars accused of forgery or slander. A small wooden frame fit around the arm or hand. Inside, a bowl of ink and a brush. The scholar was told, "Write your truth," but the brush was frayed, the ink too thick, the paper too fragile. Every stroke bled, every word smudged. He would try again, and again, until the page accepted nothing. No violence, just futility. The cage was not locked. He could leave, but his reputation stayed inside. Now imagine writing something that could never be read. When do our truths fade before they're even seen? You step into a Persian garden, lamps flicker. A long table waits, plates set, silver polished. The empty banquet was a form of soft exile. The accused was placed at the head of a grand meal, alone, forbidden to eat, forbidden to leave. musicians played. Servants poured wine into empty cups. Guests passed by in silence. Sometimes it lasted an hour, sometimes until morning. Food, untouched, became temptation, then mockery, then memory. Now think of your own table, warm, full. If joy is placed before you and never touched, does it nourish? Hey friends, our second-to-last whisper lives in the realm of reflection. The mirror box was used in certain 19th century asylums. A wooden frame held a single mirror, angled just so. The patient sat inside, surrounded by their own reflection, forced to look for minutes or hours. No words, no instruction, just observation. Some wept, some laughed. Others sat still. Doctors recorded what changed and what did not. The box wasn't feared, but it was remembered. Now, gaze at nothing at all. Let your image drift. When the only face you see is your own, what do you hear? Dear listener, welcome to the final shadow. And it is nothing. The empty room was used in many places, many times. It had no bars, no guards, just walls. The accused was placed inside, alone. No light, no sound, no task. Some stayed for hours, some days. The room offered nothing, no pain, no peace, just space. And when they left, most said the same thing. I didn't know how loud silence could be. Now you're here in your own room, not empty, but quiet. So, as this final story settles, ask gently, when nothing holds us, what do we carry? Dear listener, you've reached the end. Thank you for walking so gently through these 100 quiet stories. If you found comfort in this soft descent through time, don't forget to subscribe. And whenever you need it, these whispers will be waiting.